guys, welcome to Stop Loss Saturdays. I'm gonna wait a minute or two, allow some people to come on. My name is Dr. Cherie, for those of you who aren't familiar with me or my work. I'm the owner and founder of Workplace Wellness, a wellness-oriented company based here in Atlanta, Georgia. And it is my mission to teach companies and their employees how to live and work well for life through effective and targeted wellness programs that actually serve to decrease on-the-job injuries, workers' comp costs, while simultaneously increasing your business's bottom line. Hey, Corey. So today we are going to talk about sprain strain injuries. It's a term we hear often, but what is a sprain strain? So a sprain refers to the ligaments or tendons of your body, and a strain refers to the muscle. We often say we sprained a muscle, but it's actually you strained a muscle. But with either one, it's actually you're causing an injury resulting in micro tears, meaning like small little tears. So if you took a tissue, a macro tear, or a really large tear would be like literally tearing off, versus a micro tear, as in a sprain strain injury, would be, a few of the little fibers are kind of frayed, kind of like the ends of the tissue, but the tendon or the muscle are still intact. Which is what you want. However, when these injuries are left untreated or the cause of the injury continues, such as like lifting too much, then those minor tears can then turn into larger tears and cause much larger issues. So why do people get sprain strains in the first place? So it kind of goes back to just some basic anatomy. When you're doing a lot of physical work and your joints aren't moving properly, so in chiropractic we call this a joint fixation, meaning your joints are kind of stuck, they're not moving properly, then this causes the muscles and tendons and ligaments above and below the area to take up more of the load. And so other areas have to move more in order to compensate for the area that's moving less. Over time, your muscles, your tendons, your ligaments, it tires them out. They become fatigued, and the tissues, hey Blake, the tissues can only take so much. And so it gets to a point where, it's like that argument with your boyfriend or girlfriend or spouse, it's just like the straw that broke the camel's back. You just had enough and it blows up. Same thing with your body. So at some point it might just be you move the wrong way, you twisted, you turned too quickly, and you're like, oh my God, that hurts. And you just sprained a tendon or ligament, or you strained a muscle. Now after this happens, this is really important. So after this happens, a lot of people will continue to work or continue, about their business, or they'll try even harder to finish their job so that way they can just go home and kind of relax. And more often than not, people put heat on it. Please stop putting heat on these injuries. So heat feels good for a lot of us, but when you put heat on something like that, it causes blood to rush to the area. It feels good. It feels cozy, we feel secure. However, when the area is injured and that heat is on there, it causes blood to rush to the area, but then afterwards, because it's injured and there's a lot of inflammation and irritation, your body's unable to flush the blood out properly as it normally would. And then to make matters worse, we often, go get the heating pad, we leave it on, and then we fall asleep or we go to bed. And so this keeps that increased blood flow in the area, and because the blood doesn't flush out properly afterwards, it stagnates, you get stiff, it creates more irritation, more inflammation, and more pain. So if you happen to have a sprain strain injury, the first thing you need to do is stop whatever you're doing, try to do some gentle stretching, hopefully alleviate some of the tension in the area, loosen your joints up a little bit, and then you need to go get an ice pack. My patients complain all the time about ice, but it's really helpful. When you put ice on an injured area or an area that's chronically inflamed, it's going to decrease the inflammation in the area. It's going to push blood flow away from the area, so you're not going to have that same stagnation and irritation caused by increased blood flow. And also it's just going to help, you know, relax the tissues as well. So it's very therapeutic, very helpful. There are some big league trainers and things that, you know, are a real advocate of heat after an injury. But mind you, you know, I mean, it's a lot different. Oh, hey, Cody. It's a lot different for, you know, LeBron James. He has a whole team of people to do it for him, and then, you know, stretch him out and do that whole rigmarole for him, so he doesn't have to do it. But for the common person, ice is always best. Ice is always best. And then for the next, the most common sprain strain injuries, you know, provided they're not severe, usually resolve themselves. I mean, they resolve faster with chiropractic care or stretching, but they'll usually resolve themselves within a 2 to 4 week period. If it's a really serious sprain strain, it'll be more like 4 to 6 weeks. But the most common is 2 to 4 weeks. And in order to facilitate this happening faster, ice, stretching, but then also let's say you strain your low back. So, you know, you strain some of the muscles in your low back. Oh, hey, Michael. You know, you don't want to go lifting 50, 100 pound weights when your back's already irritated and inflamed. That's a really good way to make the sprain strain last longer, and also to strain other tissues in other areas of your body, and also, you know, possibly cause something more serious like a disc herniation, which, you know, you don't want if you can help it. So sprain strain, you want to ice, you know, stretch it out, and then also you want to rest. So I'm not saying, you know, this gives you license to, you know, sit on the couch for a week. That's not what I'm saying. However, you know, like Corey does a lot of physical work, I know. So Corey, if you're, you know, if you're at work and if you strain your low back, then, you know, you're not going to want to lift 50, 100 pound weights by yourself. You're going to want to, hey, Lauren, you're going to want to have someone help you lift and, you know, carry different things that, you know, are going to possibly aggravate your pre-existing injury. If you happen to strain or sprain something like an ankle, the general rule is rest, ice, compression, and elevation. So, I mean, it's easy with the extremities, you know, your hands, ankles, feet, those types of things, those are extremities. So, you know, rest, obviously. Take it a little bit easy. Don't sit on the couch for a week. That's not what I'm saying. Ice, 20 minutes on, 20 minutes off at a time, okay? If you're concerned about the ice possibly damaging the skin, or if you tend to have thinner skin, or you're taking anticoagulants like warfarin, Coumadin, things like that, make sure you have a dry barrier between your skin and the ice pack. So put a dry towel, or just make sure you have a dry piece of clothing in between. So ice, 20 minutes on, 20 minutes off. Compression, especially if it's an ankle or a wrist or something like that, it's really easy to wrap in an ACE bandage. Now, when you're using compression, be very careful. You know, if you haven't wrapped an ankle or a wrist or something yourself before, ask around. You know, lots of people have done it. It's not super complicated, or you can just Google or YouTube a video on it. You want to make sure that the area is supported. You want to make sure that it's firm but not too tight. And especially with feet and ankles and toes, or, you know, also your hands and wrists, you want to make sure that you check to make, so after about 5-10 minutes, you want to make sure that you haven't restricted blood flow to your hands and feet. So you check this by pushing in on your fingertips, like so. If the blood returns to your finger within a couple seconds, you're fine. Same thing with your toes. Or, you know, another sign that it's too tight is that it's cold, or your hand or foot is turning blue. That's usually a bad sign. And then last but not least is elevation. So raise it above your heart. It doesn't have to be completely above your heart, but the point is to raise it up high enough that, again, it brings the irritation, inflammation down, and then the blood flow runs down, not up. So rest, ice, compression, and elevation. It's really important. If, you know, there's an area, it's like your low back or your neck, where it's a little bit more difficult to do something like that, then, you know, ice and rest is usually more than sufficient. So I hope this is helpful, guys. Again, sprain strain injuries, you know, they're very common, and a lot of it is just common sense. You know, if you feel that your body's kind of at its limit, take a break, stretch it out, all right? And if you happen to know a great chiropractor, if you don't, I can definitely help you find one, okay? Or if you're in the Atlanta area, please give me a call. Hey, Vivica. I'd be more than happy to help you out. And yeah, so chiropractic is a great way to help prevent those injuries because it keeps your joints moving, which again, as we previously discussed, is kind of one of the root issues of sprain strains. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me for Stop Loss Saturdays. I hope you've enjoyed it. Hope you found it informative. And if you have any questions, feel free to message me on Facebook, or you can follow me on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram for more info. And check out my website, www.workwellforlife.com. Thanks, guys, and hope to see you again next week. Bye.